Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to sight read that.
What I mean is that, pretend those were written into the music, or,
Right.
you know, I mean,
Yeah.
because those are, so that would be the smallest chunk
Right.
of a self-similar fractal.
Okay.
And that lives in a slightly longer unit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's repeated here. I mean, if you look at these things like da-da-da-dum, it's an ornament, but it takes longer than that ornament does.
Right.
And if you gradually expand that, then you'll have things like do to A is the poggiatura, and then you have longer and longer segments that all bear resemblance to the original
You
one.
would think that there would be an ornament that would cover that.
Exactly.
You would think that, oh, well, let me look at that thing in the
And in the ideal
Conventions.
universe, there would be an ornament sign that would mean all of that,
Well.
from the beginning of the measure to the end. This is Bach. Which suite is this? French?
The French suites.
Number 1.
Yeah. But I'm not trying to learn it. I was just trying to read through it.
Yeah, well, that's great.
So,
And remember, Bach is its own mysterious universe to read through.
yes. And a lot of it is, timing, not so much in this, I don't think, but in the Quran, there's some syncopation that is like, oh, okay, well, I understand now.
Since you mentioned that, there is a similar self-similarity, which would be, where's the first movement that you had there? Okay. So, something like this phrase, do, 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 which goes to that C sharp. What is the rhythm of that? Well, if we take every note into consideration, then we have a rhythm that's just a rather bland series of
Right.
9 16th notes, whatever. But if you look at the top D going to B flat A, if you thought of this as a melody nesting inside of the other melody, then dum dum dum, gives you a different meaning of the passage, and it gives you a different feel of what the rhythm is, because now the rhythm is dum bum bum
Right.
instead of da 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 da.
Right.
And that can be broadened out, so that at no point in Bach should you ever feel that the rhythm has deviated from some very basic
Right.
pulsation that's always the same,
Is it always the same?
pretty much.
How did you know that?
Empirical experience over decades.
Well, I mean, how do you know that? Is there a notational, or I mean, is it just a convention? Does he ever write retard?
Probably in some off instance in some one piece. But
Or mean a retard?
there is a thing they used to teach at the Mannes College of Music called Schenker analysis. Schenker analysis was trying to work in this direction, that things, the basic elements in the piece move fairly steadily.
Okay.
And they're modified or they're altered, but
Right. The pulse,
the basic pulse remains constant.
psalm. Indian music, right?
So I don't know.
Okay.
I don't.
And just because that would make it very convenient?
No,
Or is
I
there
don't.
evidence from the time of a, you can understand it in a dance, you know, all these, I guess, were dances, or for the most part.
Right.
So that makes some sense.
No, I don't know if this is something that was spoken about by musicians or theoreticians of the time, which would make it more historically relevant,
Yeah.
or whether this is what I call musical logical. In other words, it was a logical deduction from the abstract properties of the piece, having nothing to do. It's like what most historians used to do when they they went back as far as they could get historical evidence. And then they said, well, how did we get to that point?
Right.
And you invent a logical, series of events.
Let's extrapolate from that.
Let's extrapolate backwards. Well, I mean, I don't know if you can extrapolate backwards, but
Let's do inverse interpolation. Well, yeah, I can understand. I can understand the impulse, but I don't. It's. Yeah.
Well, pulse is a general topic we should do more and more with.
Right. Well,
But
we were starting to do that last time with the El Puerto.
yes,
What pulse do you use? Mm-hmm. And especially in a 6/8 piece, what pulse do you use?
yes.
Which way do you want to do the hemiolis?
And there is a decision, and it's a little like the, what's his name? Ptolemaic. So here's the thing going around the earth.
We're doing that.
And here's, and then there's so that's a motion contained within a motion that allows for the retrograde of Mars and so forth. So, what was I saying? Oh, so choosing one alternative on the pulse doesn't mean rejecting altogether the others. The really clever thing to do is to get a little of both, or all three.
So you see the implication. You hear the implication.
In poetry, they have modulation. You're writing a piece in, let's say, Banker's, in this iambic pentameter. So everything's supposed to be da 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 da. But every once in a while, in the place of one of the da-das, you have a da-da, you get a trochee.
Right.
So that stands out in contrast to the iambs, and that they call modulation. So in some ways, we can see stuff going on in this piece as something standing out in contrast to something more commonly done during the piece. I'm glad you're reading these.
I thought maybe it would be interesting. And you had sort of, it seemed like you were going urging me in a different direction.
Say more about it. Away from, yes.
Because I had
On the sight reading, yeah. Because it's its own set of problems. And if it weren't for the fact that he was the greatest composer of all time, we wouldn't really spend much time learning what is required to understand Bach, qua Bach.
Versus doing what?
Oh, you mean, well,
Sight reading Mozart?
yeah.
That would be easier or more instructive?
Well, I don't know for you, but it would probably be a more useful tactic for sight reading just to get. First of all, there's a whole bunch of Mozart sonatas.
Yeah, and there's also probably more work, certainly 19th century work, that is patterned more after Mozart's patterns than Bach's.
I think, here's another way of putting it. If you play 30 works by Bach,
Right.
that doesn't necessarily mean that the 31st one will be more understandable than it would have been if you started with the 30th. But in Mozart, by the time you've read through the book of sonatas, you get what's going on here.
But is that the point of sight reading exercises?
The point of sight reading, I would put in empirical terms. You're invited to somebody's house. It's a chamber music evening.
Oh, right.
You're invited to the piano to play a Mendelssohn piano trio.
Right.
You've never read the you don't even know what it sounds like.
Right.
Can you do this? Why do you do it? That's unethical.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense. So I'll continue on these for a while.
Sure, as long as you're enjoying it.
Yeah, and
Don't correct anything, really.
No.
Take notice of the mistakes,
right,
but don't
I just
really.
try to go on. Yeah. Okay. And you were asking me if I had another copy of this. So I do. So.
How exciting.
You can hold on to that. And as another alternative to sight reading,
Yes.
I picked George André.
You're kidding.
Well, I don't know. You do. Some of them are relatively straightforward. Then Hecht valses are pretty straightforward. They're a little odd, but they have nice harmonic things that are odd. But Who knows?
In the modern, so-called modern period,
Right.
I find there are two types of things. Like if you look at Jackson Pollock's earlier works,
Right.
before he became an abstract expressionist, you saw the seeds of it. But he was really a master of his first style.
Right.
Pete Mondrian ended up doing tessellations, so to speak. But early Mondrian shows mastery.
Right.
So there's certain modern composers who don't have mastery of the basic craft, let's put it that way. But they just went off, yeah.
The ballet mechanic.
And exactly. And I don't know what these sound like, but you run the risk that they are
Well, you know what?
inferior examples of their species.
I'm sure that that's true. The reason I have this book was that, Leif Ove Ansnes, the pianist, he did an album, I think I mentioned it, called Horizons, and it was all shorter pieces. And he did this, and I was really interested in this.
This particular
Yeah,
piece?
this, the Cotton number 2. It was very, I couldn't play this, but I wanted to get the music to see what I was hearing, and it was interesting. It was a lot of this, very, very percussive, and a very constant pulse. I just was thinking about that because of the pulse thing.
You might compare that with the last movement of Prokofiev's Seventh Piano Sonata,
Okay,
as
have that.
being in the same spirit as this, but perhaps more masterfully done.
Yeah, this, as I said, this guy did a whole bunch of short pieces. They're basically encore pieces,
Right.
And put them in an album. And I was one of them I did play was Shostakovich waltz polka from
The Age of Gold.
the Age of Gold, and that was fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was fun. Okay.
Interesting. Good stuff to talk about.
Yeah, it's I haven't been listening to as much music as I used to because I don't drive as much. I used to, drive 2.5 hours a day
Wow.
to commute because I was working down in Redwood City, and so I started listening to CDs. I have, probably 350 classical piano CDs, or classical piano and chamber music. And so I would go by artist, and they're ordered by artist. And so I just would start loading up 6 CDs. Usually in a week I would go through that until I got stuck on the Beethoven string quartets. And then those,
Stuck for a good reason.
Those 6 CDs just stayed in there for a long time.
Well, that's wonderful.
So I would hear a lot of different music because I would buy a CD to hear a particular piece by a particular artist. But then again, there was a whole bunch of other stuff there that I wasn't really buying the CD for, but it came along for the ride, and particularly on the drives down. So I heard a lot of stuff that I had never heard before, and it was very interesting. And then I would hear somewhat later another artist playing the same thing, because there's a limited amount of stuff that they play over and over again. So sometimes that would ring a bell, and I think, I might like this guy better than the last one that I heard. I have to go back. So
You had to do a comparative analysis.
because something appealed to me, maybe the first one that didn't appeal to me and the second one.
Yes.
So it was interesting.
That can cut both ways. For instance, I call this my Marx Brothers effect. One time, let's say 1 year, I'll watch Night at the Opera, and I'll be just laughing hopelessly through the whole thing. 2 years later, I'll see the same movie again, and I'm like,
Yeah.
no big deal. Nothing's making me laugh. But then a couple of years later, the next time I watch it, suddenly it's funny again.
right.
So the individual performance is not a constant. You can react to it. But on the other hand, there is this very true thing that if you don't like a piece, get a different performance of it, because you don't know right away
Right.
to what extent it's the performance which is being translated in your mind to some quality about the piece.
Yeah. So,
It's a confusing world.
it is. I've been reading, I just picked up, I don't know where we were. Maybe up in Point Reyes. And I got a book that I hadn't seen before, Quintet by David Blum.
Don't know that.
For the New Yorker,
I know him.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
late 80s, 90s.
Oh, okay.
These are all in
No,
the
then I don't know.
early 90s. And it's just 5 sort of interviews and not biographies entirely, but short biographies with Joseph Gingold and
Oh.
and the one that I'm reading right now is Richard Good and who else? Yo-Yo Ma. And these are all done in the early 90s, so they're at particular points in their careers. Joseph
Nice.
Gingold's done, basically. And Yo-Yo Ma is just sort of kind of coming into his own.
And Richard is good to go.
Richard is good to go. Yeah. So it's been very interesting, and I never warmed to Richard Good's playing. I have a couple of things by him. I thought he was too Brendel-like in some ways. Wasn't as he was
No, I can understand what that comment means, yeah.
really solid, and I respect them, but I didn't warm to them. And then I saw him playing a Mozart concerto in the Mostly Mozart. There's a PBS had a 50 years of Mostly Mozart, so he was playing one of the Mozart concertos, and he was much more engaging in person than he was on a CD.
Interesting.
So I have to reconsider it.
Yeah, he's a confusing artist to me. I mean, I have such opposite reactions to various things he does. Plus, it's colored by the fact that I knew him at the Mannes College of Music, so he taught me how to pass my thumb under the second finger or something like that.
You went to Mannes's?
Just for a year. Took conducting and composition.
Right.
At least until my composition teacher quit the faculty at Mannes and got a job as a night watchman in an apartment house on the graveyard shift, so he had more time.
Upon teaching you? Or are they totally unrelated?
They're unrelated, but he didn't like having to waste his time teaching composition. He wanted to compose.
Right.
So he got a job where he could just sit and compose.
Well, anyways.
Should I plant myself at the other piano just for the heck of it?
Yeah, if you want, sure.
Sorry. So I have a question for you, an aesthetic question. Those last 3 chords, to what extent, well, this is just the aesthetics of it, to what extent does the chord have an aesthetic that remains the same regardless of what chord came before it or afterwards? And to what extent is it the change of quality from one chord to the next that has more of an effect defining the aesthetic of one of those chords? I've often pondered this.
Well, we'll get there. Another chord. And then there's, before that chord comes, there's a rest, but it's got a finito over it. I mean, is that a finito?
the I?
Yeah, and you just go
Fermata.
fermata over the 16th note rest, and then the chord, another fermata, and then another 16th note rest with a fermata for it, before it goes to. And I'm having problems.
One of my favorite ear training exercises when I have a student over and saying, "What? I'm going to play a series of chords. You tell me whether each one is major or minor." And I can start in a way that's very unambiguous to the listener. Like something like this: major, major. I think it's major, but if you start doing things like major, there's such a change aesthetically from this to that you're apt to want to think that this has some very different quality than this. But if all you're talking about is whether it's major or minor, they're both major.
Yeah, but the second one sounds minor.
Yes.
Is that because the bass note is going down?
No, in part. I think it's just that stuff is very context related. That's why there's a subject of harmony versus simply a study of chords.
Yeah, well, we'll get there. I have problems, at least on my piano, about playing them softly enough. And playing them so that they have even that. I'm not sure how this.
What is the lightest tapping you can do with one finger on one of those notes, like? Or that's fine. Just keep tapping the note. That's it. Pick another note. That's better already. Yeah. It's a minimized tapping.
Yeah, that almost sounds good. I tend to end up losing notes or something.
That's what the tapping does for you. You get used to all the fingers tapping in a way that feels the same at the fingertips. Are you playing this D?
Pardon?
I'm not. If you're playing the D above middle C, I'm not hearing it. Nice. Yeah. And another way of using the same technique is for very loud sounds. You start mezzo forte, you repeat it over and over again. Internally, you feel as if you're making a diminuendo. Externally, it comes out. Comes out as a crescendo. Because you have to be very relaxed to play a loud sound, unless you want it to be harsh.
Well, that's that, where was it? Huh. Oh, that was probably right there. Yeah.
That I'm just doing this A flat in my left hand and then 2 A flats an octave higher. And I'm hoping that every one of your measures fits exactly in with the shape I'm giving that pa.
Okay.
So I'm going to start it again.
Be a little louder.
Continuous rather than 1, 2, 3, start over. again. 1, 2, you keep it going. That's it. That's better. Better, Barry. So, can you, in your left hand, just play pa, pa, and see if that. You see how you stray away from the pulsation a little bit?
I come in late on that. Huh.
Well, something's happening from where between the end of one measure and the beginning of the next, some unconscious thing is happening where you lose track of whether the beats keep it going.
Is that still happening?
No, it's a little better now. It's sort of like a mold. My mother used to make Christmas cookies or Jewish Christmas cookies out of these templates.
Right.
And you press them down on the dough, and the dough always ended up in the same shape. So it's like you want, on some level, for every measure to have this shape. Yes.
I can't believe this.
Okay. It's really humbling when I do this for myself. And I'm saying, gosh, what's going on here?
Yeah. How weird.
So try this, for example. Let's start again, because we lost a beat here or there. 1 and 2 and 3. No. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2. Yeah, he dropped a quarter note from that long note. So remember when you were tapping a minute ago? Just tap gently on the keyboard, eighth notes. A blum blum. A little faster though. Blum 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 blum. And then. I don't think so. This time it came out right. But what you might notice is that when you did the C flat came in late because you were busy doing that. That's it. 1, 2. Now, can there be some part of your body that's pulsating like that as you play the piece in its normal state? That's it. That's perfect, except that you rush over the bar lines to the next first beat. So this is underneath there. This is inside your body. It never stops. So now the question is, that seems like, well, that should be easy, right? Because it's even. And yet it seems not even. And you have to examine what part of the stuff you're doing leads you away from that level playing field rhythmically or durationally. And it may, ironically, be the very stuff you're trying to do to make it musical. I know, so you're when you tell me this spot I want to have sound like that, somehow in the attempt to make that spot sound like that, you may lose the, almost, that's over the bar line again. That's good. It probably sounds very boring to you when you do it that way.
Yeah, I know, but that's the way it,
Well, that's the level ground.
yeah.
And now you want to do the bass relief that comes way back to that surface. So now what you should be noticing, Barry, what you should be noticing with this last playing through it is that a lot of the musical stuff still happened.
Yeah.
In other words, it didn't need a conscious musical intent,
Right.
but the unconscious player is musical, so it flows musically.
And what was sort of working for me
Yeah?
was tapping my foot.
Okay. All right. I always worry about people who tap their feet, but go ahead. If I don't see it, I'm not going to complain about it.
But what's weird is I was tapping on sixes, you know?
Now, can you take the left hand and not play the offbeat staccato, but still have the feeling of... You're letting the music express itself. A lot of the musical stuff that you want to express in this piece, the piece is engineered. It's hardwired sort of to do that. It's a very... I had one concert pianist student who just couldn't accept the fact that her unconscious natural musician did most of the beautiful playing.
Yeah, I mean, this is very interesting because, you know, I felt something wrong, but it's interesting because I wanted to, this last couple of bars that I played before that, it needs that regularity.
So you lose it on the so 1 and 2 and 3. Good. How would you like to try to role reverse on this? It doesn't particularly matter whether you're playing something that's consonant or in the harmony of the piece, just something that'll keep me honest. You can just do it for a couple of measures first. You can start it and then I'll join.
What do you want to do?
Oh, just what you're doing is fine. And I'll start now. It was hard for you to stay on the offbeats. Why don't you forget the offbeat and just go bottom, bum, bottom, right on the quarter notes. So forth. Notice just by role reversing, you succeed in doing what was a little harder to do when I was giving you the pulses and you were trying to fit in with them. And it should be sort of a series of minor delights on each beat to saying, oh, yeah, that fit together in some way. Oh, yeah, that one fits together in some, oh, yeah, that puts this in a new light. Oh, yeah.
It's interesting because, in a way, I should use the metronome at home.
Ah.
Well, I mean, it's the same. What I was doing on, in Puerto, is I set my metronome to a very slow, when you're talking about slowing.
I remember that.
But I kept the metronome on to force into anticipating where I was going, sort of, and looking at that. And maybe I should try going through this once with a metronome until he says, because he hasn't put in any retard in any of this.
Even though there will be many.
Well, and he actually writes it down at the bottom of the second page, where it's coming up to the ending, the pause, and giving you the next one. But I'm sure there will be.
I can summarize.
Not in the pulse itself.
Well, that's the thing. Pulse is more analog rather than digital, whereas the metronome clicks, and then the next time you hear from it, it's now in a different coordinate of time.
Right.
But the pulse is actually the thing that is pushing through time, bringing you from one place to the next. So you can't imitate it with a metronome.
It does keep you honest.
It does put the beats in the right place.
Which is what you were doing on, and what I was trying to do the last time too. But it's interesting, when you don't have somebody else to do that,
Yes.
then maybe the metronome is a useful tool.
Ah, but you do have somebody who can do that for you. And his name is Barry, sub 2. It's your doppelganger. How about we try a little of El Puerto with the same philosophy?
Okay.
Whoops. Oh, don't fall. Ah. Okay. Pen just decided to take a visit of the strings.
Pardon?
Nothing. Minor calamity averted. So you start. I'll find my way into this.
Shall I do it slowly? How do you want?
No, any tempo makes no difference. Good. So I'm playing fairly softly. I think on purpose, I'm not sure, just felt that that was the right way of insinuating the pulse into it. Can you be soft enough that you hear me?
Actually, what I decided today when I was going through this piece before I came over,
Yeah.
that in addition to playing it very slowly and forcing myself, trying to learn it by forcing myself into the next thing and looking at it before I play it, is that I also decided I'm going to play it soft.
Good. In fact, I'll play a little louder if you play softer so that this drowns you out. And that's good. Notice that, what was I going to say?
Notice that I got louder.
Oh, yeah, but I wasn't worried about that so much. It was, if you were orchestrating this piece, you might have members of the orchestra doing, they may not be that much in the limelight, but they would be something that is continuing the pulse for you. Great, Barry. Let's go over the section with this because there's a bunch of stuff happening there. Gets a little more complicated. First of all, the touch is detach. But notice in the left hand it's almost.
So the staccato marks,
Yeah.
is that just a kind of the touch that he wants? Because he's got pedal mark down.
Uh-huh.
And,
Characteristic conundrum in all music.
yeah, I know. It's like writing staccato marks up in that area. It's like, what?
Right.
So is it just
It's just being musical.
yeah.
It's not solving an equation. Now, in your left hand, can you play something like this? That's fine.
Okay.
Nice. understand that we may be overreaching right now, trying to get this passage to come into focus.
Well, that's okay.
So what's happening is that as soon as you start this, both hands become sort of conditioned to the détaché thing. And the reason for that is that this doesn't have a chance to be legato. So let's start that same spot for a trait en dehors. And you almost the piece, as Stephen Dedalus would say. Don't actually play the notes, but feel like you're playing the notes. And just listen to what I'm doing. 1, 2, 3, dum, 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 dum. Do you see how important that left hand is, especially not so much on the main beats of the measure, but the da-da-dum, da-da-dum. Yes. Good. Let's do that again. I wasn't with you, but let me do the right hand.
I'll start.
See how much of the coloration of what I'm doing is based on the harmonic subtleties and what you're doing.
Okay, let's do that again.
All right. Good. Now just pretend you have no trouble playing this and just gather it all together. Good, you're getting in the right direction. It's funny how the left hand is almost more important than the right hand. The right hand really can do without the left hand there.
Yeah, I mean, all of the sort of pedagogic indications really depend on that left hand being smooth, steady, and having its own phrasing.
Can you play?
That
Yeah.
syncopation and odd accents just not work at all.
That's right. Can you start in the second half of that first measure again and play in your both hands the left hand?
It's hard.
It's hard for you to do. That's okay, then we don't do it. Good. You can leave out the first beats of the measure if you want.
I was playing the first measure, not the first measure of that part where the melody comes in. Sorry.
Oh, okay, I guess.
The first measure, I was going back up to the,
Okay, so this is where the melody comes in, right?
right, okay.
Now, we're both playing it in two different octaves, so we're getting a maximum of confusion and interference. And that's really what I want you to hear is that type of dissonance, cognitive dissonance. you're playing the right hand part in 2 octaves. That's it. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Do, 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 do. See, you don't time those syncopations.
Okay, let's try that again.
That's me. Okay. 1, 2, do, 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 1, 2, do, do. You're a little. 1, 2, 3. We're having trouble getting that together.
I'm having trouble with my 2 hands doing this.
All right, do just the right hand and do it up there. 1, 2, 3, do, do, do. Good. That should have given you the feel for it. Now pretend you're almighty and powerful and then play the passage. Better. So what went away in the left hand is well, it was jumping around. Da, da, dee, da.
Yeah, I'm not as fluid down there. I haven't played it this fast.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
So when I play my left hand, it would help if you could use 2 hands to play the left hand like this. Left hand, right hand, right hand, right. Use the left hand to play the first note of the measure, and the right hand to play the remaining notes. See, we've orchestrated it.
Yeah,
We've got the full picture now.
right. It is. That pedal point, E flat, really is. I mean,
Needs a third hand.
yeah, but it is just there all the time until, until the top of the 3rd page. Yeah, but
Notice that in the left hand, after the first couple of measures that the hands are playing together, the left hand starts doing things like A flat, E natural, F. That's a melody. Da-dum. Yes. No melody and now a melody. Da-dum. Yes. And let's bookmark that we should talk about how to jump in the left hand. I'm finally now, because I'm doing a Gershwin song with Katrina, I'm finally figuring out how to do this sort of back and forth thing in the left hand. So if you want, is that what they call stride piano by any chance?
oh yeah, where you just, well, it's like,
You jump back and forth ranges in the left.
yeah, it's like Chopin waltzes,
Got it.
except it's not always octaves, because it's tense. So, yeah, that's right. And my father said always, give me a bass player, not a drummer.
I get that.
Because it made things life a lot easier for him. Yeah. So, and how? So you're having? I would have thought that would be second nature.
I always thought it was. And then the last month or two, and I've been practicing, I'm saying, where's my second nature? I'm making mistakes with that sort of stuff. So I had to rework it. Came up with some interesting things, too.
But this seems a little different.
It's as if, so think of it this way. You have the cellos and the basses in that measure playing this. And you have the viola going da-da-dee-da-dum. But then you have a third instrument, maybe a French horn that just does this.
Yeah.
That's it. Somebody's playing all the notes, somebody else is playing just a couple of the notes, somebody else is sustaining the bass. It's orchestrated.
Maybe nobody
That's starting to come into focus.
Yeah, and
Hard passage.
it is. I mean, and part of it is that if you're not careful, the accent gets on the wrong syllable in the melody.
Yes.
You know,
I'm glad you noticed that. Because some of the accents belong on the wrong syllable,
right, I know.
but others don't. Right?
I know. It's like the last, I don't know how that's arranged on, but there's where on the G flat, that accent on the final eighth note is like out of the way. Well, no, I guess it happens earlier.
In that measure, can you start with this as your bass, B-A-S-E? Good. Good. Now, just
Yeah.
eliminate the rest. That's all. Now do the, see how you tend to be late on the third beat? Dum, bum, 1, 2, 3, da, dum, da, dum. That's it. Bravo. Do, 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 dum, dum. Yeah. The speed at which you do the ba-da-da thing
Yeah.
has a very strong impact on when your right hand feels like playing beat 3 in those measures. So if you don't play this at the right speed, that's it. You'll come in too late on the third beat.
I was thinking, when I was, the other day, or actually yesterday, I was on a walk,
Uh-huh.
and I was going through this piece, both pieces, in my head. And as I was hearing El Puerto, I thought, this thing needs to be really sharp. It's almost like on the guitar, just a pull-off. Rather than if I were doing it on a guitar to go that fast, I think I would just do a plump, just a plump.
Right. That's when you pluck the string once, but you finger 3 notes?
Yeah, you pluck it and then immediately pull off with a sideways motion. So there's,
Oh, so that changes the pitch.
yeah, so it's almost like that instead of. But on piano, it sounds better to do do a shape. But on guitar, it sounded like it would either be a pull-off or kind of.
You can get several notes on the guitar from one pluck, too.
Oh yeah, sure. You can. It's
a different sound, though.
It's a different sound. On a trill like this or a little shake or whatever it's called. The second note and the third note are not as loud.
Right.
And the problem is here, I think, the accent is on the last note.
But the last note is a staccato.
Yeah.
So that argues in favor of the other interpretation.
You not?
A little bit. The important thing is, though, to link it to something that's going pop. That's it.
Now that's all bad enough, but this last one here, yeah, it's not a staccato note. It's held, and it's a 2-note slur down to the staccato.
The most important thing going on there is the melody that starts on E, F, and then F, G flat. That's the important thing. Don't have the top note overhang the middle note.
Yeah.
That's why there's a staccato on beat number 3 and beat number 6.
Right.
So that the note on top doesn't stops at, that's sort of it.
This is very hard to do.
Right. Do a little more with the accent on the offbeat that they have written in.
Which ones?
On da-dum, da-dum.
But it has the accent on the third in the left hand.
That's all right, let it have its accent. But you want the first note that the right hand plays to feel like it's a downbeat. Leave out the left hand for a second and just listen to this. I'm sorry, that wasn't too helpful. That's it. And that should be a continuous melody. That's it. It goes right through the rests. That's it. And then if possible, the left hand is invariable. Closer. Barry, do you have to go back to work today?
Yeah,
Okay.
but soon I will. Yeah, this is a very interesting piece to me to listen to. One of the reasons I liked it was because of the sharp accents and
Yeah.
offbeat stuff.
Bit of chaos amid the regularity.
Yeah, it's very very much like a port with lots of stuff going on. Port in Cadiz.
Can you just play this part in your left hand, maybe using both hands? The same forte. A little more melodic.
Huh?
A little more melodic. That's it. Now let me come in with you. I'm sorry, I'm not. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2. Yeah, you're doing too much to do my right hand rhythm there. This just needs to be da 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 dee da 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 da. Yeah, the accents in the left hand are more clarification than anything else, but the feel in the left hand should be as smooth. Yeah, that's more like the underlying thing before you put in all the, aggravated offbeats. I gotta leave for the gym.
Oh, this is interesting stuff.
Very interesting. That can't be Goya. Who the hell's the painter of that?
Pardon?
I'm trying to figure out who did the cover picture.